special interest groups who have funded our elected officials, paid them money to be a detriment to our public school system. It's not fair to the children, it's not fair to me in my profession, and if we don't turn around, we're going to be a charter state, period. Let's stop playing politics with our children and put them first.
Ms. Freeman, this question is for you. To say there are problems in paradise with the rollout of the Common Core is understatement. Our state has been polarized with this rollout of the Common Core, and so as an incumbent for the state superintendent, what efforts will you lead to ensure that the Common Core and its assessments are approached in a way that benefits children?
One thing with Common Core, as I travel around the state of Georgia, I'm hearing from educators who are doing it every day. I was down in Coweta County, and they piloted Common Core, so this is their 3rd year to get adjusted. They say they love it, the teachers that I talked to. I was over in Augusta, Georgia, in Richmond County, where they also piloted Common Core, so they've had a few years to get used to it. And here yourselves in Athens, Clarke County, this is your 2.5 year with Common Core, so your teachers, it wasn't just shoved down their throats. But there are some school districts in Georgia, like Lincoln, for instance, and other school districts, who just began Common Core at the beginning of this past school year in August. So it's hard to implement something when you have not been trained or taught, and there was no professional development classes held on the what, when's, how to do. And I think that's why Common Core has a lot of negative. But then the other flip side of that, when you look at the testing mechanism, it was so expensive that we couldn't afford it. So we're still doing the old testing, which is not compatible to Common Core. So there is a adjustment that we've got to make there. And as state school superintendent, I'm going to do what I do best, and that's talk to legislators and make sure that they support a bill that will allow teachers input in the decision-making process of what instructional tools they use and testing apparatuses that are used, because these are the people who are doing the work. I've been married to a high school teacher for 31 years now. He's been teaching, this is his 30th contract. And one thing that I notice every day when he comes home is that work doesn't stop. It just keeps going on and on and on. So we've got to do the right thing and make sure that whatever we do, it's going to make learning successful in Georgia.
I did. Okay. As we did at the end of the first set of go-rounds, for the second go-round, those of you that didn't get asked a question, do you wish to comment on any of the questions that were asked?
I'd like to talk about the student scholarships.
Mm-hmm.
I'm adamantly opposed to anything that moves public education dollars away from public education. Scholarships in the form of vouchers or income tax credits or whatever you want to call them are wrong. We should be working in this state to create great public schools in every community for every child. And every parent should have the choice to send their children to a great public school in their neighborhood. And when you take dollars away from public education to fund private institutions, that does not help a school get better. That hurts the school. You know, when I served on my board of education, it would have been really easy for me to just do the thing that was right for my one child. But as state schools, but I couldn't do that. I had to look at the entire district. As state school superintendent, I can't be focused on individuals or a few children. I have got to be focused on the 1.6 million children in this state who attend public schools. And I think the first priority of our state government and our State Department of Education and our legislators who seem to continue to manifest this myth that funding private institutions or scholarships to private institutions improves our public education system. It's a myth. It does not work. Our children need to be able to attend great schools in their communities.
If I may, this young man talked about sort of the concern with paperwork and testing, and you know, like I said, I've been teaching in Georgia now for 21 years, and what I've seen when I started No Child Left Behind, and now with the new implementation of Common Core, is that we didn't have any tests at all. And then we started with the Georgia high school graduation test, and they said, yeah, but this is only for a little bit, and we're gonna get rid of that soon. We're gonna start, and we're gonna replace that with the end of course test. Well, the end of course test came, but guess what stayed? The Georgia high school graduation test, because they were phasing it out and we're putting this in. And so every time there was a new initiative, or every time we had a change of initiative, every time they changed the rules on the teachers in the schools in Georgia, what was happening was the old rules were still in place, and the tests were still in place, and the paperwork was still in place, but we had this new initiative too, because we're kind of scared to get rid of the old one. And so that's what I think is happening to the schools and the teachers. So my proposition is can we just stop changing the rules for just a little bit? Can we just stay with something here in Georgia for a little bit? Because what's happening is, what I'm seeing with my seniors who are graduating right now, and y'all, the Georgia high school, this is the last class who's taken the Georgia high school graduation test, and those test scores came out today, and I had to tell some young people, you're not walking. Worst day of my life every year. I cry every day, I cry the whole way up here, and cry with my children. But if we can just stop, breathe, stop changing the rules on our kids, stop changing the rules on our teachers, stop changing the rules on our community, and stick with something, and let our children be successful, then I think all of that ancillary stuff, and that's exactly what it is, it's ancillary stuff, will go away. That would be what I would suggest, just stick with something.
Anyone else?
I'd like to add, just to follow up on teachers and the working conditions. Again, something that I taught for 22 years and was in education for 22 years. I attended school and we never heard the word test. I'm sure we took them, but it just came naturally. That's because what we need to go back to education is that we need to make sure that we are talking about the children. When you look at the testing and everything that goes on right now, all you hear is test, test, test. But you never hear child, child, child. We have to, as I said, go back, we have to personalize our education, not standardize the education. We have to think about, even when we give a test, why are we giving the test? Is it to measure and say that we can bubble in, A, B, or C better than somebody else can bubble in A, B, or C? Does that prepare our kids for life? When I graduated and I started applying for a job, guess what I never took? An ABC test. And nobody asked me how well I could bubble in. So we need to make sure that what we are focusing on in education is the right thing. And that means, giving our teachers the time to teach. One of the things that, as my wife was a 30-year veteran, and when I became an administrator, she said, Richard, the only thing I ask of you is never forget what it was like to be a classroom teacher. And that means that you have the freedom to sit down with your child day in and day out and teach. To measure their learning day in and day out. And that means that you have to be free from all this paperwork that we're doing, all this data collecting that we're doing, all this testing that we're doing. We have to allow our teachers to get back to doing the job they were trained to do and that they want to do. You know, I assure you that a teacher, if you were to go to ask a teacher, you know, from, as I cross the state, they just tell me, Richard, I just want to do my job. I just want to teach. I want to interact with my kids. And that's part of my plan, is restoring the autonomy and the ability of teachers to once again control the classroom, evaluate their kids, and take the kids where they need to be. And again, that's my pledge to you as your next state school superintendent. Thank you.
I want to touch on equitable access. As state school superintendent, if you intend on doing business in Georgia with our schools, you will benefit every single child. There will be no more of giving scholarships to this one select group of children. If you've ever looked into a senior's face who has working parents who are working 2 to 3 jobs to make ends meet, and to have that kid tell you, Miss Den, I'm not going to college, I'm going to get a job. My parents, I just can't put that burden on them. Those children deserve a chance to go to college. We have to sit down with our scholarship organizations. We have to provide some equity access to college for our students. And it may not be college, it may be a trade school, it may be a technical school. Whatever their dreams are, it is my job as state school superintendent to make sure that there are a wealth of opportunities. People want to talk to me about charter schools. We have a pre-K lottery. If you've ever stood in a line for a pre-K lottery, it's 150 people that show up, but only 20 get in. Why can't I have a pre-K charter school to benefit more communities and more students? Because where I'm working right now in Atlanta Public Schools, if 120 people show up and only 20 get in, there is a 70% chance that those 100 kids that don't get in pre-K will just sit at home for the entire year, and they start off behind. I am a proponent of public schools, and charters were not created to eradicate the public schools. I will not promote anything that takes the money away from public schools and takes the opportunities away from working class families. I will not support that. And as state school superintendent, it is my job to ensure that more of our lower income students have opportunities to pursue their dreams, just like our higher income students. Thank you.
Okay. I've got some questions from the audience, and I'm going to try rapid response. Because I think everyone ought to have an opportunity to respond. And so I picked 4 questions that seem to pick up some themes that were developed tonight, but also are cross-cutting. And so I'm going to ask each of you to just give as quick and succinct a response